The water sure is green. Green with envy. For my gains, that is. Okay, no more shitty jokes. That's enough of that. Train the muscles, not the joints. So welcome back to Natural Gallant Bodybuilding. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about low carb versus low fat diets for fat loss or for cutting for bodybuilding, because everybody's always obsessed with the cut. A lot of times people are putting the cart ahead of the horse, as they say, and they're trying to cut long before they ever build any muscle. So first and foremost, I say build muscle first, then concentrate on cutting. Because if you build that muscle, you're going to build the metabolism, and then from there it's going to be easier to cut. So that said, once you do go towards a cut, you're going to be faced with an option, lower carb dieting or lower fat dieting. Now, I'm not saying it has to be no fat or no carb, but you're going to be playing around with one of the macros dominantly as opposed to the other. Now, one thing I did notice when I was competing is that my body responded differently for each diet. Now, in order to get extremely shredded, I had to basically lower both at some point. Not right away, but at some point I had to continually cut macros from fats and from carbs, and I got right down to straight protein and then green vegetables, like fibrous carbs, right? Which is not quite the same as a starch carb or sugar carb or whatever, right? Mountain. That's a long way down there. I wonder how much greens I could eat on the way down. If I roll just right and open my mouth, I may be able to ingest a lot of healthy foods, branches and sticks and leaves mostly. So I had to cut down the macros quite a bit in order to get to extremely shredded condition. But that said, I did do competitions with different diets. And one thing that I did notice was that the lower carb diet seemed to help me get leaner in the upper body faster as opposed to the low fat diet. Now, the low fat diet, when I had more starches in my diet, I noticed that my leg development was better. The cuts in the legs seemed to stay or seem to be accentuated. So there's something to be said for the different diets and how they basically help starve different types of fat stores. One thing that might explain this is that there are different receptors depending on what type of fat you are accessing, and fat in the lower body and fat around the midsection may be different and maybe require different processes in order to access for energy. That said, I did notice that when I did the lower carb diet for a period of time, my upper body started looking great, but my legs were kind of behind, and vice versa with the lower fat diet. So I found that a combination of both types of diets was necessary. So what I would do is that I would do lower carb for 3 or 4 days of the week with a moderate amount of fat, or maybe low amount of fat, but not none. I would do, maybe half avocado or something like that, or a few tablespoons of flaxseed oil in my salad and things like that. And then I'd carb up where I'd go low fat for a couple days, but I'd have more carbohydrates. Clouds sure are moving fast. Where are you going? Why are you in such a hurry? Now, the nice part about cycling your carbs is that you have a tendency to hold on to more muscle mass because carbs do have a protein sparing effect. So sometimes when people go too low on carbs for too long, they deplete their muscles of all glycogen. And if you do this too much, or if there's too little glycogen in the muscle, then the body starts to eat the muscle for energy. So it is good to have a little bit of glycogen in there, even when you're on a lower carb diet. So you're gonna have to top up a little bit here and there. Now, after you've accomplished 3 or 4 days of eating lower carbs with moderate amounts of fat, you're gonna notice that you're gonna flatten out. Looking a little flat. Maybe it's time to change up the rip range there, Mr. Lake. You're not quite as bumpy as a mountain. Sometimes you end up looking worse than ever before because you have not carbed up, which is a lot of bodybuilders, when they get ready for competitions, they carb up a day or two before, or sometimes several days before, and then they start skimming off those carbs to get rid of some of the water. So there's many different techniques to do this, but the bottom line is that the carbs will make you look better when they are filling out the muscle. But if you have too much carbs, you start to spill over and actually put on body fat. So having the happy medium between carbs and fats is the key. So through experimentation, I noticed that after 3 or 4 days of eating lower carb, my body started to go backwards. It's almost like I started to catabolize my muscle tissue if I went too low in the fats and too low in the energy. And I found optimally, I'd have 2 days where I'd carb up, like maybe it's Wednesday and Thursday, and then I would cycle back down in the carbs and start replacing some of those carbs with fats for energy. And through going back and forth, it's almost like it confused my body somehow. I don't know why, but I ended up being leaner. So I used this technique for 2 of the bodybuilding shows that I ended up winning. And this was when I finally gained some mastery over getting lean for competition, whereas before I was just going low fat or low carb, but I wasn't finding that happy balance between the two. Now, you don't have to overcompensate and fill up by eating 2 bags of potato chips like I did last night. But as you can see, because I was eating lower carb for several days before, when I did have a lot of carbs all at once, I didn't really spill over. I just ended up looking a little bit bigger and fuller. Now, again, you can overdo this like anything. You don't want to overdo the carbing up. You don't want to eat too much carbs because then your body's going to spill over and then you're going to start storing fat. So that's counterproductive when you're on a cut anyway. But yeah, having a cyclical diet where you go between fats for energy and carbs for energy can be a very effective way of losing body fat. So it's really a combination of both. It's not just one or the other. So in this way, I was accessing different processes in the body to possibly, burn some fat. But at the same time, I was noticing that I was filling out and looking much better because the carbs have a protein sparing effect. So I was trying to access the best of both worlds. And that said, sometimes my calories would go up on the carbing up day. So that way I would try to trick my metabolism to keep it from slowing down. Because if you just do low amounts of calories or macros for long periods of time, eventually your metabolism is going to slow down to try to catch up or compensate for that. So in order to offset that, you need to cycle your calories or cycle your diet. One thing that I noticed with a lot of people is that they don't realize that the body will look different depending on whether you're doing low carb or low fat. So again, you can choose whichever one you want or cycle both together somehow in your weekly training. But just be aware that having fats for energy or having carbs for energy will affect how your body burns fat and where it burns the fat from. So I hope this helps you out in your training. I hope this helps you kind of see things from maybe a new way, maybe a new perspective. Maybe it introduces something that you didn't know about. And thanks a lot for watching. And if you need to get home, just go to naturalgallantbodybuilding.com. And thanks to the Patreon supporters and take care for now. Mountain.